It's Funding Rural. I'm Erin Borla with the Roundhouse Foundation in Sisters, Oregon. Our foundation operates a working ranch, and it's been a great way to test out new ideas and practices like rotational intensive grazing and soil monitoring to determine carbon sequestration. Farming and ranching, after all, is about experimentation, adaptation, and innovation, though many folks may not think of it that way. It's a whole lot of problem solving, done by people who often don't have a whole lot of expendable capital. That doesn't mean that ranchers aren't deeply committed to stewarding the health of their land for generations to come. The term regenerative ranching has become more common in recent years as livestock producers look for a way to tell the story of their stewardship to a broader audience. Dallas Hall Defrees is a fifth-generation rancher in Eastern Oregon. Growing up on her family's ranch, she didn't think about her father and grandfather's practices as regenerative. It was understood that taking care of the land was the most important part of the job. Now she's the director of regenerative ranching with Sustainable Northwest. She gets to work with ranchers all over the region who are actively trying to improve the biodiversity, soil health, and well-being of their livestock while making a living.
I did always, I think many of us, we never really know what we want to be when we want to grow up, right? But I was really interested in science. I loved growing up on a ranch. I kind of loved the intersection of both of them. I ended up getting a master's in rangeland ecology because I felt like I wanted to do something in that field. And I worked in the natural resource field for a while, kind of doing conservation work and permitting. And I always felt that I just wanted to work more with ranchers. I just really liked and missed working with them. And this position with Sustainable Northwest came up and I saw it and I was like, I would be a fool not to apply for this. It seems right up my alley and the stars aligned and here I am. So I'm really grateful that it came up and now I get to work in conservation and with ranchers and I really love it.
That's great. And that program started as funded through Climate Smart Commodities. Is that right?
Yeah, we did receive a startup grant. Our first grant was through Murdoch Charitable Trust as kind of a program starter. And then quickly after that, we received a Climate Smart Commodity grant that was $10 million for 5 years. That really helped set the foundation of our program. Unfortunately, those funds were frozen as of February of 2025. But we have a lot of initiatives kind of in the pot right now and are continuing to grow our program and make do.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the bigger initiatives that you started with when you first started this work. And then I want to lean into a little bit of the work that you've done now that you've built relationships with those folks.
Yeah. So really the basis of the program when I was pulled in was we wanted to work with this network of producers who were very motivated to create a regenerative program. They saw it as a marketing tool. They felt like, their producers were already doing that and we needed to help quantify it and kind of formalize it in this way. And there's other great programs out there that are doing similar work. I mean, you Land to Market, Regenify are all doing this, but none of them quite exactly fit the need of the co-op Country Natural Beef who we're mainly working with. And part of that was because they have a very unique finishing model where they don't finish cattle in a traditional feedlot. They finish them on pasture, but they are grain finished, which is like a very kind of niche way to do things. But we believed that there was a story to be told there, and there was some ecosystem services to be had there, along with some animal compassion things. So all of that is a long-winded way to say that we really started this program to build something that worked for these producers, that helped them get out on their land, see what was happening, come up with their own objectives for what they wanted to see happen over the next 5 years, and most importantly, come up with their own way that they think that they can get there. And they do that alongside technical service providers and with a lot of support. And basically, we're on the back end of that, quantifying it, looking at those metrics, and then we'll go back and along the way help those ranchers get funding or whatever support they may need to help them meet their goals. And then we go back and we monitor and see the changes. And it's a very high level view of what it is, but that's kind of what the basis of the program is.
I think ranchers, when people think of ranchers, they think of very independent folks. How does that relationship, what does it look like? Do you just show up and you're like, hey, it's me. I'm going to test your ground. I'm sure that doesn't go well.
Yeah, I think it's taken a lot of, it depends. One, there's some people are really excited about it. Some people are pretty unsure and, are thinking of, is this more of an audit? Are you coming here to judge what I'm doing? And that is absolutely not what we are there to do. And I think that once we kind of get there and start the conversation, they understand that, right off the bat is, this program was built, and it's a main goal of mine. And I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it really was built with producers at the forefront. Like, what are the needs? What would I want on my ranch as somebody coming in and helping me out? And we had a lot of producer input as we were building this too. We had a kind of a working group with key producers to ask what would they want. But yeah, I would say some of the first 10 minutes have been icy at some time, but all of them have come around, and it's all been a really great experience.
I can't imagine anyone being icy with you. You're so lovely. It's
Thanks,
just
Sarah.
those questions of like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But now that you've come back, I mean, what is this, year 3, year 4?
It is year 3. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So people now have a relationship with you, and I'm
Yeah.
sure they also tell their neighbors, right? Folks look over the fence and chat with friends and neighbors and talk about the program.
Yeah. One of the, not to jump around too much, but one of the biggest successes I think I've really seen is I had this brainchild when this program first started, is as much as you might think I'm a lovely person, Erin, and I really appreciate that, it's okay if other people don't, right? And they may not always want to hear from me, but I do think that ranchers do want to hear from one another more often than they have the opportunity to. Like ranchers are out there, meaning like they are rural. Some of these ranchers are 2 hours away from anybody else, really, or at least 45 minutes away from their next neighbor. Like they don't always come across these groups where they can they don't have an office space to come in and chat with and bounce ideas off of one another, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed is we have created these peer-to-peer groups, and they're kind of regionally based, similar, like fairly small, around 10 ranchers in each group. And that has been a way that I think we've actually made a lot of progress too, is they can go and talk about their experience when we came on their ranch and what they saw and how it differed from what other ranchers saw and what other ranchers are doing about it. And that has been really successful to me. And I've really enjoyed seeing that grow, because I think that will always have more momentum. Ranchers will always have more momentum with one another than anybody from the outside coming in.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to talk, and I know I've shared this before on the podcast, but the size, scope, and scale of the landscape in the West is almost unfathomable. Landscapes are so large. We still have range riders out here that don't see each other. I mean, they're working on their own independently on ranches that are 100 or 200,000 acres, if not more, with grazing rights on other federal land. And they're riding fences and checking cattle and doing so at a pretty small scale. Like it's not a big group of folks. They don't do corporate team building activities.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The context is different too. I just had some friends visiting me from Portland, and we were talking about Wordle, our Wordle scores. And
we always talk about Wordle.
Yeah. I was mentioning that I was irritated because I lose my streak anytime I go out of service. If I miss it for a day, if I'm out of phone range for a day, I lose my streak. And so I really can only get so high. And they were all laughing because they're like, Dallas, what percentage of the population do you actually think ever goes out of service for a full day? I was like, well.
Oh my goodness. Well, and some of the work that we've seen come out of your partnerships is not even necessarily aligned with the initial goals of Sustainable Northwest and the regenerative ranching. I want to talk a little bit about the work that you've done post-fire in Grant and Wheeler and, is it Wasco County?
And Gillum.
And Gillum. So those counties were hit pretty hard in 2024 with a wildfire.
Mhm.
Did you have any regenerative ranching partners in those counties to begin with that are in
We
country natural beef?
Yeah, we did actually. We have ranchers, I think, in all of those counties that you listed, but not necessarily in the exact footprint where we're now piloting this virtual fencing project that I think you're getting to. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. Let's talk about what happened when that fire, there was a series of fires, Eastern Oregon, lower population, very open space, a lot of sort of sage ground, juniper scrub, really difficult to fight fire in, but was grazing land for a lot of these ranches
Mhm.
and devastated. In addition to not only their grazing lands being decimated, we saw a loss in their fencing.
Yep.
So, talk a little bit about how that project came to be, what it looks like, and where it's going.
This has been one of those instances where something really neat came out of like something really not neat. And that was, as you mentioned, those 2024 fires. And so, gosh, that was probably just almost exactly a year ago that those fires were happening. And what was a little bit different about those fires is one, the scale of them. There were fires happening all over Eastern Oregon and in just about every county at the same time. So resources were really low. It was not good conditions. Fire conditions were bad, and these fires just kept on going. And in Gillum County specifically, where we're kind of working right now, some of the ranchers there just lost all of their feed. So not just summer feed, but also their winter feed. They didn't have anywhere to put their cattle, and resources statewide were really limited because of all of the other fires happening. So, there wasn't an excess of hay really able to go around. There wasn't an excess of land where these ranchers could put their cattle. And it created just this huge need for these ranchers. And I can only imagine how stressful that was for them. But what came out of that was this really novel idea, and I can't even take credit for it. It was a kind of a seed planted by Herb Winters with the Gillum County Soil Water Conservation District, who over time had kind of continued to talk with some of his ranchers and his board about virtual fencing and what that could look like in their neck of the woods. And when this fire happened, one of the ranchers called and said, "Hey, I think virtual fencing might be the way that I could get my cows somewhere." And pretty quickly, like through a very grassroots, very uplifting kind of story, Gillum County was able to fundraise to buy some towers for the Soil Water Conservation District. Ford Family Foundation came in and funded, I think, $75,000 as well for some collars. And really just like very quickly, they were able to piecemeal together and get towers in and virtual fencing in and get these cattle in a place where they wouldn't have been able to get them without that technology. And then, so that was kind of the short term need. And during that time, I guess I should say, Sustainable Northwest was looped in. We were there helping to try to some funding, kind of organize partners and kind of get this, what became a pilot project off of the ground is in a post-fire scenario, how can virtual fencing be used? And maybe to back up a little bit, for those who aren't familiar, virtual fencing is a fairly new technology with ranchers. It's kind of like those dog collars, the invisible dog fences. So it's a collar that goes on the neck of a cattle and it gives them audio cues as they get to this invisible fence line. And then it kind of works up to a shock, just like an electric fence would be that cattle are often used to. So that was the short-term need. The long-term need was that fire also burned down hundreds of miles of fence. So even if these ranchers were able to get back onto these acres, they couldn't because there was no hardwire fence back up there. And to replace that fence, the cost of it was like, I think, like in Gillum County alone, I think it was like $9 million to replace that fence. And that's just the cost, not to mention the labor. Talk about Western scale. You should visit Gillum County and get on a high point and look as far as you can because there's a lot of land to cover out there. And so just getting that fence built in a timely manner for these cattle to get back on was going to be tough. And so we started looking at, okay, how can we translate this virtual fencing into a long-term need? And then also looking at, okay, how can we be using this technology to be getting back on these landscapes in a better way than we would have otherwise? Meaning we can make smaller pastures, we can exclude sensitive areas that need more recovery, longer recovery from these fires without putting a hardwire fence there. So riparian areas or areas that had a really high burn severity that we need to just parcel off for a bit of time. Whereas before, it's kind of like you're either in this pasture or you're out of this pasture. These fences aren't moving, right? And now we can move these fences fairly quickly. And so we are in the process now, a year out from that fire, where we have 3 landowners using virtual fencing, I think estimated over around 47,000 acres. We're continuing to try to expand this work. We're hosting, if anybody wants to join, on October 20th, a tour in Gillum County for funders and legislators and landowners who want to learn more. And yeah, we just really want to see this grow. And all while keeping in mind that this is a pilot and we are learning a lot, the ranchers are learning a lot, but so far it's been a really great project. Herb and I joke about this a lot, that we actually don't want to talk about it too much because it seems like it's going really well and we don't want to jinx it. So
Well, and that project has been so innovative because there are so many requests for like, oh, we could try this virtual fencing. What does it look like? And ranchers on the ground have a lot of questions. There's a lot of capital outlay on that. I mean, you talk about 9 million in regular fencing or triple wire fencing plus the labor. That's expensive, and it's an expensive thing to think about. What's the cost of some of those towers if somebody wanted to implement that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think also something that's really novel about this project in particular, and I think that we should take this as an example of how we should be thinking about changing management in ag. To answer your first question, these towers cost about $10,000 a piece. And there's different companies out there, so some of them function differently. So some of them you don't need a tower, but you do need full cell coverage. Some of them you don't need full cell coverage, but you would need a tower. So in this area, there's not a lot of great cell coverage, and so you need towers, which are around $10,000 a piece, and then you rent the collars for around, I'm going to say total, including batteries, $50 a head. So the cost can be a lot for a rancher. Like if you were doing a $50 a head input into your business model, that's a pretty high expense. What was neat about this project in particular is the SWCD actually owns the towers. And so they took away that cost from the producers and they put them on trailers. So these towers are mobile. They can go wherever the need is. And then it allowed these early adopting producers, their only cost was the collars, right? And some of that actually initially was offset by some of the grant funding. But then they got the proof of concept. A lot of times ranchers, just the upfront cost of some of these things in a normal scenario, it's too much to just try something that you don't know if it's going to work well for you. But in this scenario, what we're seeing is if we can take away that upfront cost, now we're seeing the ranchers are invested and they will invest their money in it because they're seeing how well it's working from them. So we will replace those towers that these producers are using with towers that they then now see the appeal of buying for themselves, put those back in kind of this pool for other ranchers to try out. And then I think we can kind of get this snowball effect where more and more ranchers will get used to it, will continue to adopt it, will learn, will share that knowledge with their neighbors. And I really think that we will increase adoption over time through that model.
So this show primarily is about funders and accessing additional capital for rural places and ensuring like tell the rural story a little bit. You've worked with a variety of funding opportunities, government funds, you have partnerships with the Soil and Water Conservation District. Talk about relationships with funders, how that's worked, how you're telling your story.
Mm-hmm. By and large, I would say that I've been very lucky with kind of our different funders, and especially the landscape in Oregon. I feel very lucky to be in Oregon, where I think there's a lot of different opportunities for funding. I would say the majority of our work has been federally funded, but we also have more kind of state NRCS level grants that we've worked through. The state grants, like by and large, I've had a very positive experience with that. The 2025 kind of change in federal funding has been difficult. We lost that large $10 million grant. That was unexpected, kind of unprecedented to be in contract and multi-years into a project and for that funding to be cut. But as you mentioned, like we've had other really great partners kind of step up and help fill those gaps through private foundations who are oftentimes more nimble and kind of can see the need and identify it and help out in those ways. State funding like OWEB is also a great tool. You kind of just have to figure out as a nonprofit or somebody who looks for funding all the time, you kind of have to look at these different funding agencies as different tools in your toolbox, right? Like this funder does well for these projects. This funder does well for these projects in these timelines. And how do I kind of come and bring all this together to create a functional and durable program? And I think having a diversity of funders and just the network of folks that I get to work with has been really incredible in helping me kind of learn and achieve that.
So what do you think success looks like for the program that you're currently running?
I think you can get into you can get really tied down into metrics of like, we're preserving X amount of acres, doing X amount of this, et cetera. And that's true. Like we're doing really great work and we can kind of quantify it. But really for me personally, I see success when I see our program helping ranchers achieve their goals. To me, nothing could make me happier. That really fills my cup. If I have a rancher come to me and say, hey, this really sparked something for me. Yeah, that's what success is to me. And the more I can reach that, the happier I'll be.
Yeah. You serve on the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission. That's like a governor appointed gig. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going well, but I was gonna make something snide that I think the only reason that I'm on that commission is because I was the only one that said yes. So no, it's going well. I feel I'm learning a lot. I'm just rounding my 1 year anniversary of being appointed to the commission. I feel very honored to be able to represent Eastern Oregon on that commission, and also just you know it being an Oregonian, but gosh, like seeing what is in front of me on the commission about all of like coastal fisheries. I'm an inland gal, just learning so much about our state that I already kind of thought I had a pretty good grasp on. And that's been really humbling, honestly. Yeah, it's a little bit drinking from a fire hose, but I've really appreciated the opportunity so far. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ton of information, I would imagine. And you're right, there's so many different sections of biodiversity and different ecosystems, and having to have a grasp on all of those, and so many communities that are impacted differently, urban, rural, on, like you said, coastal, inland, mountainous, sage steppe, all those things. It's just really, really hard. And I think that's another thing that funders are trying to look at, right? We're trying to figure out how do we measure success in those places that we don't really know anything about, but we're relying on our partners on the ground to tell us what they need, and trying to make good decisions around funding some of those things. How can funders and others, maybe even as you're in that role, look to measure the work that we do in rural places? Are there ways that what are some ways that we can do that work better? What are ways that we're doing it well already? How do we get closer, I guess, to the problem and have a better understanding?
One thing that I think, kind of bringing it back to the commission, is it is almost a breath of fresh air, I guess I would say, just because I find it beautiful, but really how much of our state really truly relies on our natural resources, economically, socially, culturally. It is so ingrained in who we are as a state and what we rely on. And I think one thing that I hear from ranchers often is we innovate a lot. Farmers, ranchers, agronomists innovate all the time. We have to. And there can be a lag sometimes in funding sources doing that same level of innovation. We kind of get into these boxes of these are the practices, these are the ways that we do it because this worked really well for 3 years and now we're not going to change it, right? But things are always changing and the landscape's always changing and the need is always changing. And I think just maintaining kind of that thought process for where these funds are coming from is really helpful. the needs change constantly. The needs are never the same. So the funding should never be the same. That being said, it's great to have funding for like things that we know will never change, but on the ground in Oregon, I feel like that is really important, just kind of as a principle to think about. Coming from a small community and thinking about funding here, I always want to see things that are going to be self-sustaining, but funding those things can be hard. It can be a longer term, longer investment process. A lot of times funding, especially from funders who would be funding kind of more rural things is more of like a yearly or a short-term thing, which can help you get it off the ground, but doesn't necessarily help you sustain it and get it to a point where it can maintain its own. And so I think that can oftentimes be a difficult thing for folks, to kind of think about. But I don't know, Erin, I would love to, you probably know about this way more than I do. It's hard and it changes all the time.
Yeah. No, and I think those are all really great points. I think one thing that you touched on throughout the conversation today was sort of the permission to try things, that permission to fail. Mm-hmm. You talk about virtual fencing, and there's going to be challenges. There's going to be bobbles or troubles, and recognizing that having funders by your side that can say, it's all right, we'll try it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think that permission to fail has been something that I've heard over and over from folks that are on the ground in rural places or trying and innovating in new ways that really just let us try it. We think this is going to work.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's
not.
a great way to put it. That's exactly right. Yeah. We don't always know.
That's right. And we've had a few, we call it paying tuition here, where it's like, oh, we tried that. Nope. We're going to pivot and do something differently. And especially on the ground, right? On the ranch that we run through the foundation, on the ranch that we have at home. I mean, we try things and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yep. We're all still learning very much.
Yeah. You have kiddos. What are your thoughts for them and your hopes for them? Do you think they'll be the 6th generation there in Baker County?
I do have, I mean, I would never put that pressure on them, but I just feel so grateful that they have the opportunity to get raised on the ranch like I was. I just feel like that's so special that they get to share that with me and then also their grandparents. That's something that I got, and that to me is just the best gift I could give them. So I think that those experiences will help them choose their path. But yeah, we get to, my son, I have a 4-year-old son, and like he loves it out here. He's a big fan. So, it's hard to pull him away.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so glad that you do what you do and really appreciate you sharing all the things. I can't wait to learn more about virtual fencing. I will be on the tour, so I'm looking forward to seeing it live and in person, and really appreciate getting to know you and doing great work. So thanks for being here.
You bet. Thanks, Erin. It's always good talking to you.
Give people enough space, they can be really innovative and focus on different projects and allow the opportunity to see things in a different way. Farmers and ranchers have had to be that way as things shift, whether that's in climate or years of drought or different changes that they're seeing on the land. They're adaptive innovators, and funders should be that way as well. Things are changing constantly, so how can we be adaptive to all of those needs on the ground? I wanted to highlight that I think internet connectivity is something we forget about in rural and remote places, and how the digital divide is a very real thing. It's something that's important for things as simple as keeping your daily Wordle streak to these really incredible projects like virtual fencing. Funders play a really important role, helping people on the ground with different knowledge and being able to take good ideas and allow folks to take a risk that they may not be able to afford. When you have a chance, work with an organization like Sustainable Northwest or another intermediary who has built those relationships and allowed for the opportunity for a little bit of risk-taking to try some of those things. If you're a funder who wants to get your boots dirty and learn some new things, maybe see what virtual fencing is in action, you should think about joining Dallas and Sustainable Northwest's tour on October 20th. We'll share information about it at fundingrural.com. Thanks for listening.